In the interest of time, I will get started. Thank you for joining us for today's SSBCI Capital Program Disbursement Request Training. We are very excited to restart this training. I know we haven't gotten together on disbursement requests since November, but we've been actively working hard to process disbursements. Before we get started, we just want to remind everyone we will record this session so we can make it available in the reporting portal for your own internal training. Just to provide an overview of the presenters today, Raisa Muamu will provide a brief overview of the disbursement process and the key areas to focus on when completing the disbursement request form. Hope Jeffries will jump in and demonstrate the the disbursement template and provide some key compliance transaction information, whether it's a CAP, LPP, LGP, or VC transaction, 171, and admin. Jay Flowers will jump in and will perform a demo of how to download and submit your template using the SSBCI reporting portal. Karen Peabody will jump in with some best practices that we have learned on documentation in general in our review process, just from all the disbursement we have done. And as we mentioned in our invite that went out earlier on this training, the remaining portion of this presentation will really focus on the VC Fund worksheet that we created to help VC Fund properly report on the DRF. So if you're not a VC Fund, please feel free to drop. If you don't have that program type, please feel free to drop. But if you do, please stay on. That will walk us through. And we will share the updated VC worksheet after this training, alongside with the presentation and video recording. And we will make it available again on the portal. So we can get started. And just as some basic housekeeping, please just come off mute. You are already double muted. That's our process here. That's how Raisa set up her training. So please, if you have any questions, come off mute to ask those questions. You can stop any of us if you have any questions, or you can submit them through the chat and we will provide responses. Just a caveat, I know we have had some active disbursement in queue and we may have sent some of those questions to you based on our review. We don't want to use this time to go over any jurisdiction-specific questions. We don't think this is the best use of time. We will make ourselves available, like we said in our communication on our compliance review questions that went back out to you. We are available to make time to talk about those things. Also, if you have some questions around the VC Fund worksheet, we will be reserving time with our SMEs next week to maybe dive in deeper. So if you have some complicated questions, Suya's going to show you like a basic example, but it might not fall into what your program has. So we do ask you to reserve time next week on some of the equity office hours with our SMEs to maybe dive in deeper in the interest of time. That being said, we'll get started. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, 1 second. I have somebody here at my door. Sorry about that. Somebody's kindly cleaning my office, taking my trash out. So thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, these are the resources we will discuss throughout this presentation. We ask you to please bookmark these. Read it from time to time, share them with your partners, our capital policy guidance, our reporting guidance, and our national compliance standards. I really want to point folks to the national compliance standards. We do have some really good recommendations in there that may help you prepare as you're coming for your disbursement request, such as just doing basic review of your transaction, making sure that your documentations are aligned with our program requirements. So please, we do request that you, from time to time, look at these guidance and reference them and share them with your partners. Also, we have frequent, our FAQs are available. We do ask you to also look at those because it might be more clarification that may not be in our policy. And of course, if you have any questions, reporting, compliance, or policy, we ask you to please send them via our SSBCI mailbox, and we will make sure we do our best to provide timely responses. Next slide, please. Our team just want to provide a snapshot of the disbursement. My team has been really, really busy processing disbursement since your first tranche after your approved application. So far we've done over about 45 disbursement requests, and just this year we've done 25. So we are very eager to get your funds out to you to make sure you have successful programs. As you can see here, like I mentioned, we have 45 in total since we first started this process. And just this year, we've done 25. And some of those mostly have been second tranche, but we have done some third tranche requests. And for the first part of this year, we've dispersed over $1 billion. So again, like we're really, really eager. And you drive this process based on how clean your documentation, your transactions, being compliant, you being responsive to my team's questions. So thank you. And we will also want to thank all the outreach managers who have helped us through this process. We can go to the next slide, please. And another thing we've done while we were, not doing these trainings, we've been developing really good processes to give you some, help you expedite your review process. So what my team has done is we are offering pre-validation, so pre-submission validation. So before you get to 80%, if you started getting around 50, 60%, we do offer an opportunity for you to submit your pre-submission disbursement request form via email to us, and we will perform early data validation and give you some pointers to look out for as you start completing your templates and getting to your disbursement, your 80%. Another tool we have that I mentioned earlier is our VC Fund Worksheet. We've updated our worksheet just based on interactions with you and our VC SMEs. And for the VC Fund, we do ask you to start using it as early as you make your commitment to funds, and start putting in transactions as you get expanded, obligated, 171, any admin costs. This will help our team with reviewing your transaction. It will also help you, actually, most importantly, to be able to report accurately on your DRF. Another tool we've developed is our supporting documentation reference files. So every time we select a sample, we will generally give you some of the documentation that we've seen from other samples. This is never prescriptive. You might have other documentations that you feel comfortable using to make sure that those transactions are aligned with the program rules. As always, we offer one-on-one calls with jurisdictions. I think we've done a ton of those in the last couple of months. So that's always available for you. So like I said earlier, if you have received compliance review questions from your disbursement, whether you're in your third tranche or second tranche, please feel free to set up time and we can go through any questions that you have. We can move on to the next slide. And I think that concludes my side of the review. I'm going to turn over to Raisa Muhammad if she would jump in. Again, if you have any questions, please send them in the chat. Thank you, Raisa.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for joining us today.
Okay.
So it's yours.
All right. So what can you do now is the title of this slide. So we're going to talk here about how you are or should be working towards receiving your next tranche. First things first, we recommend you download the template now. This is so that you can begin filling out the template as you begin enrolling transactions. So later on, Hope is going to go over why downloading the template early is going to be helpful for you. So this template was uploaded to your portal after you received your first tranche. This is important because if your jurisdiction has had any modifications, we just want you to make sure that those modifications are reflected on your disbursement request form. So just make sure that you're using the latest disbursement request form that's in your portal. So if you're also planning for a modification and planning to come in for a disbursement, just reach out to us at SSBCI_information inbox so we can just make sure that your template is up to date. All right, next slide. All right, how do I know if I'm eligible for my next tranche? So hopefully we all know the general need to knows about disbursements. You have your different allocations, the main capital, VSB, SETI. And so to come in for your next tranche, you'll need to have at least 80% of that first tranche expended, obligated, or transferred, EOT, to receive the second tranche. And you need to have 100% of your first tranche and 80% of the second tranche to receive your third tranche. So additionally, per SSBCI policy guidelines, jurisdictions also are required to have 2 expended transactions in each active program that you are using to qualify for your 80% threshold. So what does that mean? Let's take it as an example here on this slide. So jurisdiction Z has 3 approved programs: a loan participation program, a collateral support program, as well as a direct equity program. So all 3 of these programs, let's say, for example, have obligated transactions, but only their LPP and their direct equity program have 2 expended transactions. So if the transactions in the jurisdiction's LPP and direct equity programs amount to 80% EOT, then the jurisdiction is eligible to request their second tranche. However, the obligated transactions that are in that CSP cannot be counted towards your 80% EOT requirement because there are no expended transactions in that program. So we just wanted to clear this up so that jurisdictions know that each of their programs don't have to have 2 expended transactions in order to come in for that next tranche. Just the programs that you are using to reach your 80% EOT need to have those 2 expended transactions. All right, so let's move into this timeline. So this is how it's going to look overall, the process for disbursement once you come in. So first, jurisdictions are going to submit, starting over here on that orange box, jurisdictions are going to submit their completed disbursement request form in the portal. Once the disbursement request form has been submitted, an email with a DocuSign of the Annex A will go directly to the jurisdiction's authorized official. Once the Annex A is signed via DocuSign, SSBCI will be notified, and now moving into the gray box, data validation will be performed on that disbursement request form. So this data validation checks for completeness of the disbursement request form, as well as some major program requirements. So we're going to be looking for private financing ratio, the SETI objective, the required expended transactions that we just discussed, as well as the lender capital at risk. These data validations may also require communication between compliance and the jurisdiction, and potentially resubmission of the disbursement request form. Next, in that dark blue, once the disbursement request form is squared away, compliance is going to select sample transactions and request supporting documentation for those transactions. We'll review the supporting documentation to determine if the supporting documentation matches what you reported on the disbursement request form. So also after that, compliance may have some follow-up or clarifying questions for the jurisdiction. So that will be handled via email and or in phone calls with the jurisdiction. And again, at this stage, depending on the extent of the updates that are required, resubmission may also be needed here. So then once the follow-up questions are clarified or resolved, then the disbursement request will move into its final review for approval and funding. So again, the overarching theme here is that the disbursement request process involves regular communication between the compliance team and the jurisdiction. So jurisdictions should have, make sure that they have appropriate personnel and staff available to address these follow-up questions and provide additional documents if necessary. All right, moving on to the next slide. All right, so these transactions, obviously we're going to be reviewing them. So the first thing we want to make sure you know is that they need to be for an eligible business purpose. So SSBCI supported loans and investments must be used for an eligible business purpose, and I have them listed here on the slide, so I won't go into detail on them. Some examples of the business purposes that we've seen so far are constructing new buildings, converting or renovating buildings, expanding existing buildings, refinancing outstanding debt, and working capital. But also we want to make sure that not only is the business purpose eligible, but there are also no ineligible elements in the transaction, such as goodwill. So just be mindful of that as well. And another thing to be mindful about is that generally your application is going to be part of your allocation agreement. So we're going to be looking at your application while we review your transactions to make sure that the transactions are in line with what you put on your application originally. All right, so we have here EOT, just as a reminder, because again, also on the disbursement request form, you're going to have to identify if the transactions are expended, obligated, or transferred. So for transactions to be considered expended, SSBCI funds must be dispersed to a specific borrower or lender as part of a set aside to cover a loan guarantee, collateral deposit, or business or purchase participation for a specific transaction that has closed. For VC equity transactions, SSBCI funds must be directly invested in a specific business. So for example, in a loan guarantee transaction, the amount set aside to cover the guarantee, typically in a reserve account, would be considered expended if it's set aside. And similarly, in a collateral support transaction, the set aside amount, which is typically held in a depository bank or trustee bank, can be reported as expended when the loan closes. So for transactions to be considered obligated, SSBCI funds must be committed, pledged, or promised in writing to a lender or borrower as part of a loan participation to a specific borrower, and that loan has not contractually closed. Likewise, for an LGP, loan guarantee program, or collateral support, SSBCI funds must be committed to cover guarantees and collateral supports, but the loan has not contractually closed. So for direct equity investments to be considered obligated, there should be a signed investment agreement and the funds have not been received by the business. For VC fund investments, the funds must be committed, pledged, or promised in writing as part of a VC fund investment agreement, and the obligation is at the fund level. And lastly here, for transfer, there should be a documented need to fund a loan transaction or investment or to pay for allowable expenses. All right, another element of the disbursement request form is going to be the provider. So the provider definitions are found in our capital program reporting guidance. So I'm not going to touch too much on the details of the definitions here, but I do want to highlight the provider and companion loan transactions. So for companion loan programs, the provider is the lender whose loan is the source of private capital at risk in the transaction. And for equity programs, for fund programs, the provider is the fund that invests SSBCI funds and private capital in a business. And for direct investment programs, the provider is the implementing entity or contracted entity that invests SSBCI funds in a business. And if you have a debt equity hybrid program, then the definition for the provider is going to follow the type of hybrid program you have. If you have a funds hybrid program, it'll follow the definition for funds. And if you have a direct hybrid program, it'll follow the definition for direct. All right, moving on to the next very important element here, the loan or investment transaction amount. So for loan participation programs, the loan transaction amount should be the private capital from the lender and SSBCI funds. For CAP, loan guarantees, collateral support transactions, that transaction amount is going to be the private capital from the lender supported by the CAP reserve account or SSBCI guarantee or collateral deposit, depending on the program that you have. And for equity programs, for direct and fund programs, that transaction amount should be the private capital investment plus the SSBCI funds. Okay, and just make note at the bottom there that this transaction amount should exclude borrower's equity, concurrent private financing, as well as any additional government funds. Okay, and as you'll see, or as you know on the disbursement request form, another tab we have is the administrative costs. So administrative costs should be allowable, allocable, and reasonable, and jurisdictions should be sure to maintain adequate documentation for both direct and indirect administrative expenses in accordance with 2 CFR Part 200 Subpart E. So some things here I want to note are here on the slide is that administrative costs are important to you because they can be used to help you reach your 80% EOT, and they should be reported on the disbursement request form. Secondly, administrative expenses reported on the disbursement request form can be reported as line items, but they also may be reported in aggregate on that disbursement request form. But also, like I mentioned, be sure that documentation is available to support that. And lastly, administrative expenses that were paid for using program income cannot be counted towards the 80% EOT requirement to receive your next tranche. So just be mindful of the difference between administrative expenses that are paid for with program income. All right, and another tab that we have on the disbursement request form is for VC fund programs specifically, and this is going to be where you report services to portfolio company costs or 171 costs. So for each charge for services to portfolio companies, participating jurisdictions should maintain proper documentation per the national compliance standards, and jurisdictions should consider adopting best practices to monitor venture capital fund activities in line with industry standards, such as reviewing the venture capital fund's documentation of services provided. So what are we going to be looking for? So as compliance, we're going to be looking to verify that there's an agreement that exists between the provider and the jurisdiction disclosing the services to be provided. We're going to verify that the fund discloses the provider's services to the investee. We're going to be looking to make sure that the provider has timely executed a certification annually. And we're going to be looking to verify that the payments were made within that annual certification period, amongst other things. These are just some of the things that we're going to be looking for on this tab. Right, and moving on to the last slide for me is unenrollment. So as far as unenrollment, as it relates to the disbursement request process, there are two areas in which it comes into play. The jurisdiction can self-identify non-compliant transactions during their own review and preparation, and compliance can also identify non-compliant transactions during our review. So what happens if that occurs is that the non-compliant transactions will be removed from the disbursement request form, and additional sample or samples will be requested. The good news here is that compliance can still process your disbursement request if non-compliance comes up. The only snag would be that if that non-compliant transaction or transactions brings your 80% your EOT percent below 80%. In that case, then the jurisdiction will have to provide additional transactions to maintain that 80% EOT. Okay, so that is all for me. I'm going to pass it over to Hope Jeffries for a demonstration of the disbursement request template. Thank you.
Thanks, Raisa. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome, perfect. Thank you all. I will be walking you guys through the disbursement request template. And we just put in some data that we got in, just dummy data to help us walk through this template. I will start with this template just by letting you guys know that when you get this template, it has a cover page, tooltips, and the related transactions that your jurisdiction has, as well as the admin and the VC fund costs. I'll start with the cover page. When you get the cover page, it will have pre-populated your jurisdiction name over here in column C4, and we'll also have it pre-populated the date of your executed allocation agreement. We'll have populated in line C7 the amount of your first tranche that you got after your allocation agreement was signed. So in this example, we're walking you through how you come in for your second disbursement. So in your second disbursement, for lines 11 and 12, from lines 12 through 15, this whole section is pre-populated for you as you enter your transactions in the tabs that I just talked about. So remember, in order for you to come in for your second disbursements, like Raisa said, or your third disbursement, you have to be 80% EOT'd. In other words, the amount that we gave you in this $20 million, you have to either have expanded, obligated, or transferred about 80% of the $20 million. So moving on to line 17. In line 17, for your tranche one, this amount will be pre-populated for you. And this is your EOT percentage. Like I said, your EOT percentage needs to be at least 80% when you come in for a second tranche. And then this will be recalculated for you, automatically calculated for you once you enter again your program transactions as explained earlier. For lines 21 to 22, these are demographic items that we request. Your SETI expended transactions. Again, these will be pre-populated based on what you input in these transactions. So we do. I'll walk you through how we require you to identify your transactions, either SETI or non-SETI. For your SETI objective in line 28. You'll notice that this amount of SETI, the one that we have here is 50%. This amount is predetermined for you when you get your allocation agreement. This amount this objective is already shared with you. So in other words, if you get the SETI amount, the extra amount for reaching your SETI objective, you need to make sure that you're at least meeting the 50% objective that was allocated to you or predetermined for you when you got your allocation. And then in line 29, this gets recalculated based on what your SETI amount was in line 21 and what the total transactions were. And this line item gets recalculated for you. Moving on to the tooltips tab. This tab pretty much shows you what data elements are we looking for in column B. And then it also shows you in column A where those data elements are allocated. And then on column C, we'll let you know whether there's a drop-down menu associated with that data element or not. And then in column D, we'll give you a description of what that data element is. So in other words, when you're completing the DRF, when you're completing this form and you're not sure what we're asking you to put in there, we always recommend you to come to the tooltip, read what the data element is, and understand what the description of that data element is, and then you have a better understanding of what you need to input. I'll walk you through one of the examples. In this case, we're going to walk you through the CAP transactions. And one thing that I want you to understand is that for the most part, the CAP transactions, the tab that I'm going to walk you through, the transactions and the data elements are very similar when you come to your loan credit transaction and your VC equity transactions. I will walk you through the various differences once I walk you through the CAP transactions element. So starting with with CAP transactions, we do have a drop down for our approved program. This template will come pre-populated for you for the transactions that you actually have pre-approved with the SSBCI program. And column A for the approved program, you have a list of the approved programs. In this case, for this example, we have a capital access program. When you click on the capital access program, it'll automatically give you what the program type is. And in this case, the capital access program. In column C for the provider, we ask you to put the legal name of the provider, whichever provider that you're using that's been approved to run this program for you. In column D, this is a unique transaction ID. We don't have a prescribed formula for this transaction. You can decide on your own whether it's going to be numeric or alpha or both, or a combination of alpha numeric, but we just ask you to be consistent as you pick your unique transaction ID. For your disbursement date, this is the date that we actually asking you, when were the funds wired to the provider or wired to the business? So make sure that the wire date matches your disbursement date. We have noticed that some jurisdictions sometimes use the journal entry date. In some cases, they use the wire date. We just ask you to be very consistent when you use your disbursement date. Pick one date and use that across all your programs. So that way, when you come in for a request, when we're reviewing your documentation, we're not trying to figure out what date should be the disbursement date and going back and forth. For the business name, this is the name of the business that's receiving the funds. Here again, we're asking you to make sure that this is the legal name of the business. We've seen some variations. Some people use the doing business as name or the actual legal name of the business, or just put the first part of the name of the business. So here we're asking you to include the full name, the full legal name of the business, as it appears on the business's incorporation documents, or the business loan information agreements that the jurisdictions have and the provider has. And in this case, I'm going to just put together a fake name, a random name. So I'll just say Risa was the provider. And I'll say the unique ID was 3456. It lets me input that. And then the disbursement date, it was February 13, 2025. And remember, your disbursement date cannot be before your allocation date. It always has to be after your allocation date. So remember not to give any funds or distribute any funds before your allocation date. This date cannot precede your allocation date. For the business name, I'll use, let's say, LLC Incorporated. That's the name of the business that's receiving this funds. For the EIN number, always make sure that it's a 9-digit number. So for instance, if I put 134 and I try to skip, I'll get an error message saying, it has to be a numerical value of 9 characters. So make sure that it has 9 characters. But in instances where the business name is an individual, you cannot put the individual social security number. So we recommend that you just write SSN to indicate that it's a social security number. So in this case, I'm just going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's the EIN number. And the state in which the business is incorporated. Over here, we do have a drop-down menu of all the states that we have in the US and the districts. And I'm just going to put Wyoming in this case. And then we actually also ask you to put a 5-digit zip code. Please make sure that the zip code that you're using actually corresponds with the business state. We have seen in some instances where the zip code does not correspond to the business state. So make sure that, again, you're inputting a 5-digit zip code and it corresponds to the state. As a reminder, we do use this to make sure that 10%, you're only allowed to have out-of-state businesses. Only 10% of your business should be out of state. So we use this demographics to make sure that you don't go over that 10%. When we talk about the primary purpose of the loan, again, we have a drop-down menu. So be as specific as you possibly can using the drop-down menus that we have. What was the loan really used to do? Was it to acquire inventory or leasehold improvements? But make sure to be specific of what the primary purpose was. So in this case, if I put acquire inventory, you may not have to add what the secondary purpose is. But if I go in and let's say other working capital other, I will be required to explain what that other was. So moving on to column N. So the column N and column O, I'll talk about them concurrently. This is the total loan transaction amount. And in my example, I'm going to say the total loan transaction was, let's say, $500,000, right? For cap transactions, you need to make sure that for the SSBCI allocated amount, it can only be between 2% and 7% of this amount. So for instance, if I put $1,000 in there, I'll get an error saying, hey, the value that I input is less than or it needs to be is less than or equal to 7% and needs to be greater than 2%. So I get an error. So this will help you guys input the correct numbers in there. So in this case, in our example, I'm going to use 30,000. So I get 30,000 and the red error comes out. In column P, this is a full-time equivalent of the employees for this business, right? How many employees were being supported by this business? This is a very important number for us to put in there. Anything that's 9 employees or less, then we need to come in here and certify that's a very small business. So you'll find that if I put 9 in this column, I need to come in here and verify, is this a very small business? The answer is yes. Again, very small business is anything that's 9 employees or less. If I input 10 over here, then and I put yes, that's not correct. Anything 10 and above is not a small business, so I need to make sure that I'm saying no. The next 2 columns are SETI identified. So for the most part, is the business when they came in, did they tell you they were a SETI-owned business or not? So you need to verify that. Again, this helps you capturing on the cover page, like we say, that SETI objective. So in order for you to meet your SETI objective, put whether or not the business is SETI-owned or not. In this case, I'm going to put yes. So when I put yes, then I need to input in column S, or how am I verifying that it's a SETI business? So you have the 4 drop-down menus that you can pick from. In this case, I'm going to say self-identified future location in CDFI investment area. Also note that sometimes just by looking at the business zip code that we inputted, you can look into the SETI allocation and look at the CDFI map of the investment area. If you put the zip code in there, it will tell you whether or not that's a SETI area. And then the last 2 columns, this is specific to cap transactions. So we need to know the total borrower's premiums, and we need to know the lender's premiums. This is an amount that you also have to input. In this case, I'll just say, hey, the borrower's premium was $10, and the lender input premiums were $490. So as you can see from what we've done, we've populated every single column, every single data point that needs to be populated in this example. I'm going to move on to the loan credit transactions. As I mentioned, for the most part, what we did in the CAP transactions applies to both loan credit transaction and the VC equity transactions. So I will just highlight the differences that we have in these specific columns that actually don't that are additions to the CAP program. In this case, column C. When you're dealing with the loan credit transactions, column C actually asks you for the loans that you're giving. Are those purchase participation loan or companion loans? If you have a loan participation program, you will have to highlight these two things. Pick one of these loan types. So that's one of the differences that we have. The other difference that we have is in column F. We do require you in column F and in column G to determine and let us know, was the transaction that you input, was it expanded, was it obligated, was it transferred? So if you pick expanded transaction, you need to give us the expanded transaction date. What date was this transaction expanded? If you pick if it's an obligated transaction, you need to let us know what date that obligation happened. If it's a transfer, then you need to put in here what date was that transfer. Well, what was the date of the transfer? So everything else in the loan credit transactions is similar to what we just walked you through in the CAP transaction, of course, noting that columns T and U are specific to CAP transactions. And then for the loan transactions, columns F and G are specific to this, and then also column C. Moving on to the VC equity tab. If you're reporting, one thing that I do want to talk about, if you're reporting in column E, if you're reporting an obligated transaction for your VC equity funds, you only need to enter the OT obligation, the EOT obligation amount. In other words, you won't have a business name that goes with it. It's an obligation, right? So you won't have the business name to put in there. You won't have all these the business EIN, the business state, all these other data points really would not apply to you. You'll just have to let us know the investment transaction amount and that you are obligating and what you're expecting the SSBCI allocated funds to be. So any other information you will not have. As we move on to the administrative cost tab, here is where you enter your admin expense costs. Again, you need to enter the date of the transaction, the title of the admin expenses. Do we have consultation fees, legal fees? Be specific of what this admin expense was all about, and whether this was a VC fund related expense or not, and whether this was a direct cost or an indirect cost, and the exact amount of that transaction. When we talk about the fund fees, the 171 portfolio fees, you need to let us know what program was this fund associated with. In this case, I'm putting equity funds program. You need to let us know the name of the provider, and then you need to let us know the cost associated with that. I will pause here. Are there any questions related to this GRF form? If not, I'll pass on to my colleague, Karen, who will walk us through the next steps. Thank you. Karen, back to you.
Sorry, I was muted, guys. Thanks, Hope. I'm going to go over the capital program disbursement request info, best practices, and tips section. And I hope you don't mind if I go off camera. I'm going to close out the video and just go through this presentation here. I hope you're all having a nice day, and I know that many of you have already received your second disbursement and even some your third, so this will be a review for you. Also, I wanted to just say this information is not intended to be prescriptive. We're here to assist you with program compliance issues, and there are a lot of items right here on this particular slide, and I'm just going to go through a few of them. I think Hope and Race have already covered a few of them anyway. I'm going to start with the VSB, very small business. Funds dispersed to the PJ for the purposes of investing in VSBs or very small businesses must be extended towards VSB, or the PJ may be flagged for review on our end on compliance's end. So just keep that in mind. One thing we also look at in this data validations is lingering or obligated transferred transactions. The validation will flag transactions that have been obligated or transferred for more than 180 days. And we will look at that for further review by compliance. It might be sampled, just kind of an FYI. We look at lender capital at risk. We're testing for the 20% minimum private capital at risk. That's the PCAR. For CAP programs, we look at the 3.5% each from the lender and borrower premium, and then along with the 7% matched by SSBCI. One thing we also look at in the data is repeat borrower and purpose. Transactions cannot be made to the same borrower for the exact same purpose. Transactions with the same borrower and purpose will be flagged for further review by compliance and possibly sampled. Admin, I think Hope and Raisa spoke about this. One thing we look at is the percentage of the admin that we look at is determined by which tranche the PJ is currently in. It's that 5%, 3%, 3% scenario. That's all I'm going to go through on this slide because I think you've already gotten a lot of information. So if we can go on to the next one, please. And that is key disbursement information. Now, based on some previously completed disbursement reviews, compliance has identified some key insights and best practices we encourage you to keep in mind as you prepare for a disbursement request. Firstly, the SSBCI supported loan investment proceeds must be used for an eligible business purpose to an eligible small business. That's probably one of the more obvious ones. We encourage you to please review lender documentation for prohibited terms and limits for all SSBCI transaction types. Also, please look at the necessary certifications, loan investment documentation, commitment letters, and all of that prior to submitting the sample to us here at SSBCI. And just a little note, certs should be signed at or before closing. Also, please keep in mind that you should have complete language. I'm using that in quotations. It's important that the complete language for the certs is present. We're seeing a little bit of divergence in some of the samples we've had. We've also seen some missing certs, and in these cases, signatures are then obtained during the disbursement review, and that might slow down the process. So we encourage you to keep an eye on this stuff. Another item, I think we've discussed this before, but one loan cannot be enrolled in more than one approved program at the same time, and a lender may not divide one loan into multiple agreements or notes, each enrolled in an approved program for the same business purpose. That's per our guidance. If we go on to the next slide, please. And For socially and economically disadvantaged individual or SETI transactions, please keep in mind that there are different ways to qualify as SETI. Please note that the SETI-owned business certification is only required if the business owner qualifies under the 3 categories, the 1, 2, or 3 on the cert, and the jurisdiction intends to include the transaction as expended for SETI. And for transactions that qualify as SETI-owned businesses based on the category 4, that would be a business located in a CDFI investment area. If you could, we'd really appreciate if you could kind of do that analysis and include, say, a screenshot proving that the business is in the CDFI area. That would really help us a lot. Treasury what we do is we verify that SETI-owned businesses and VSB allocation have been expended for transactions that qualify as SETI-owned or VSB, and we encourage you to look in sections 4 and 5 of the SSBCI guidance for more information about that. I think Hope and Rice have spoke about this, but on the DRF, we look at the state and the zip code. Because of the 10% requirement, jurisdictions are not allowed to expend more than 10% by dollar value outside of their own jurisdiction. And also, as a general rule, transaction information like the disbursement request date, that a report on the DRF and the most recent annual report should reconcile. Other items we look at are the SSBCI allocated amount, the FTEs. So we'd like that to reconcile with the annual report because we do look at it actually. Also, we could probably go to the next slide, and that would be the key disbursement information for loan credit programs. Just some reminders, ensure that upfront fees or charges paid by the small business, and that would be excluding fees to the program, do not exceed 3% for loans greater than $25,000 or $750 for loans that are under that $25K amount. Next, for loans with an original principal amount under $100K, lenders may not include prepayment fees. So please keep that in mind. Also, for loans that are over $100,000, lenders may include prepayment fees, so long as any such fees are reasonable, customary, and clearly disclosed to the borrower before the loan closing. This is per our guidance. I encourage you to look at section 10G and the relevant FAQs, including FAQ 1. We have it all on our website. Also, for refinancing transactions, I think Hope may have mentioned this, but for reporting on the DRF, make sure that the underlying purpose of the loan should be reported as the primary purpose on the DRF, and the refinancing should be reported as the secondary purpose. That's really key. We've found some PJs have had trouble with that in the past. Another thing we see in our reviews is that I want to remind you that SSBCI funds may not be used as credit support to a loan or investment for the same business purpose as an SBA or USDA guaranteed loan. So we'd expect to see a different business purpose than the SSBCI loan. So please keep that in mind because we are seeing that as well in our reviews. Now we can go on the next slide, and that is the focus on the equity VC programs. Just have a few notes here to go over. The private investment should constitute private financing as defined in the Capital Program Policy Guidelines, Section 8C on one-to-one financing. Again, I encourage you to take a look on our website for that. And also for direct investment programs, if the equity investor is a fund or a similar entity, the fund or entity manager must have exposure to the risk of its portfolio in a manner that is consistent with industry standards. Also, the agreement between the fund and the portfolio company should include an identification of the services to be provided to the portfolio companies and a disclosure of these services by the portfolio company's fund manager. That's something we look at, that kind of that annual certification in our reviews. Also, this one's a more complicated one, and that is that PJs should be careful and ensure that they maintain pro rata at all phases of investment and fund expenses. I do encourage you to reach out to us if you have questions on this in this area. We have some really great SMEs who are very knowledgeable and helpful, and they can help you out a lot with this one because it does get complicated for the funds. Now on to the next slide, please. And that is this is new. It's our supporting documentation reference file developed by compliance. Just to help jurisdictions collect, organize, and reference their supporting docs that they're sending to us. We're hoping it expedites the review process. So far, we found that it has on our end. We also recommend labeling and numbering of the files. So that'll be, that are going to be uploaded. It helps us with our efficient review here on our end. Jurisdictions will also receive this particular file, the documentation reference file, from compliance once they receive the sample request email. So take a look out for that. And we would like you to please complete it and submit it along with the requested supporting documents that you are sending to us. Again, I mentioned, I think this will really help make it a smoother process. We've been doing in the past few months, and it really has helped. So we can go on to the next slide. And this is a bigger slide. It has a lot. It's a reference slide. It's got a lot of information. Not going to go through everything, but maybe a couple items. For example, before submitting documentation for sample transactions, we encourage the PJ to review the documentation to ensure, investment documents and loan documents are complete. The items on the left hand of the column side of this document are what we review during the disbursement review, and the items on the right-hand side explain the data elements we're looking for. In many cases, we're checking the data elements against what's reported on the DRF. Again, it's not a comprehensive list. We may request additional information during our disbursement reviews. Another item, please ensure that the borrower application document in this list includes the borrower's name and address, business purpose, number of full-time employees, total loan amount. It's a sample document that we use to check what's on the DRF and to help us complete our review. Other documentation such as the credit memo, sources and uses, and the settlement statement, we look to see that it will indicate to us whether there's any other public, private, or borrower's equity financing in the transaction. Now on to the next one. We kind of have a similar slide, but it's in the equity VC space. Again, not a comprehensive list, and I'll just go through a few of the key items. Such as the investment agreement. It outlines the terms and conditions of an investment between parties. The cap table is something we really, really look for straight up when we're doing our review. It shows who owns the company before, during, and after the investment. It should also include contingent rights to ownership provided to an entity or an individual, and helps us to identify possible conflicts of interest, what we call COI. There's also an insider list we look for, and this insider list should be cross-checked against lists of current and potential equity owners of any potential business. And we do have an FAQ regarding how to maintain an insider list, so I encourage you to look at that. I won't go into any more detail here. Other items are the term sheet, which summarizes the amount of the investment, the form of the investment. Also, we'll list the business purpose. In addition, the capital call, which is the act of transferring the promised funds to the investment. That would note the funds dispersed to the investee and the date of the disbursement. Also for the term sheet, we're looking to make sure that private capital is at least pari passu or junior to SSBCI with regard to cash flow rights. So that's all I'm going to cover on the BC slide here. Now the next one, if you could go to that one, please, that is for cap transactions. A lot of similar items. And similar to credit in particular, we look at the borrower application, the basic info, borrower's name, business purpose, etc. We look at the credit memo, sources and use and settlement documents. And then we're looking to see if there's an indication of any additional possible public, private, and or borrower's equity in the reported loan. Now I think we can go on to the next slide, please. And this one is a bit more complicated as well. This is our eligible private passive real estate eligible passive company, EPC, operating company OC transaction, what we call the EPC OC transactions. We have a listing here of the information we're looking for regarding these EPCOC transaction. First off, we look at the term of the lease agreement between the EPC and the OC, and that should be equal to the term of the SSBCI supported loan or investment. And then this one's a big one. 100% of the rentable property acquired and held using the SSBCI supporting loan to the EPC must be leased to one or more OCs, and then the OC may subsequently sublease no more than 49% of the rentable square footage, and that is the case in the purchase of an existing building, and no more than 40% in the case of new construction to one or more unaffiliated tenants. So that is all in our guidance, and I really encourage you to look at it, because when we're doing our reviews, I know I end up looking at it too to make sure I've got it right. Other items would be evidence such as the borrower's application, references the co-borrower's information, and the guarantee agreement identifies the guarantor. Make sure that's in the files. And then for EPCOC transactions, please make sure that the ownership structure is clear and that there's documentation for the requirements applicable to the EPCOC transaction. As I mentioned, the written lease agreement, and I have here a note about where you can look in our capital policy guidelines for more information. It's section 7F. And now we can go to the next slide for some sample best practices. So you're ready for your second or third disbursement. Here's what we recommend. We recommend a secure file transfer method to send the documents to us, such as a secure portal. We don't want any personally identifiable information on our system. That's the PII. Please note that SSBCI staff only need temporary access. So when the disbursement review is complete, you could please remove our access. And also please do not password protect individual documents, and please ensure that the documents are legible. Sometimes we have had instances we couldn't actually read them, so please review before you send to us. And if you submit items with any redacted content, we may request access to the redacted information if we think it's needed. So just be ready for that. And again, please incorporate a naming convention and index. It's just very helpful for us to help us find documents. To the extent you can give us page numbers and the names of the file where information can be found, that is very, very helpful. And it will certainly expedite your process. And those are the main tips I have. Now we have one last slide, and you can go to that, please. And that's the finish line. That is the best part of our review, and that's once our compliance review is complete, we reach out to the jurisdiction with the final closeout email. And just keep in mind that there are some additional reviews conducted within Treasury. For example, the process also moves to operations that does our funding. And for jurisdictions that have already completed their second tranche request, I encourage you to, hold on to any communication regarding the transactions discussed with compliance, and please keep them into account for any other transactions going forward. And that's all I have, guys. And I'm going to pass it now over to Jay, who is up next, and he's going to do a demo for you.
Aaron, thanks so much. I'm going to quickly share my screen. We're coming up on time, running a little bit late. So I'm going to do an abridged version of a demo today. First thing I'm going to do is inside of the chat, if I can find my chat again, I put in a few links. The first one is going to be a link to the portal, which is going to be this screen here. And this is the link that you would use if you have more than one program with Treasury. You will come to this link and you'll see all of the different programs within inside of Treasury. If you're just dealing with the SSBCI program, you will come down here and click the SSBCI program and watch the link up top, and that's going to change over to have that SSBCI homepage. So basically use the second link if this is where you need to be if you only have the SSBCI program. Again, we're going to go through this pretty quickly. We'll come over here to Capital Program Disbursement Request. We click on that and just need to find your record in order to start your second or third disbursement. Click the blue pencil icon, and everything in here is just like everything in the SSBCI portal, where you have the left-hand navigation, you have a widget on the right side, and then you can navigate to the different sections. And on the bottom of each page, you're going to have a back and next to navigate through the sections. The first section is just going to be some instructions. Second section is going to have your implementing entity information. Please verify that. If anything is incorrect, please let us know. We have a section down here for contacts, and we have the word page tucked in right over here. So if you ever want to add individuals to your jurisdiction account, you just click that word page, and then this page pops up. First thing you do for the first time is fill in the certification by putting your name here, click and submit, and then the designation form pops up. Once the designation form pops up, you have two options. You can edit current contacts records in your account, or you can add new contact records in your account. Edit, you just click that pencil and you update the information here. The information on the left side is going to be for portal access. Information on the right side is going to be for communication. We're going to jump back over to add a new contact, and here you just need to fill in all of the information that has a highlight or a red asterisk. And if it is going to be the person for the first time and they do not have ID.me and they need to finish ID.me in order to access the portal, it's very important to add that individual here first before ID.me to make sure that person is associated with the correct account before ID.me verifies their information. If you have any questions throughout that part, you can just give us a call or actually email ssbci_information@treasury.gov, and we'll be able to help you walk through if you have any kind of hurdles right there. So we're going to close that. We're going to jump back to the disbursement request, and then section 3, here is going to be your template. So you click that, download that, work with it offline, save it on your computer. Once you have it saved, you will come back into the portal and you will upload here. You will find the file. And then once you find the file, just click open after you've highlighted it. And it's going to jump into the table after this dialog box has a blue done word right here. Click blue done and you'll see the file come down into the box down here. And then once that shows up, you come over to the certification page, and then you can highlight your name here. You copy that, paste that in right there, and then you hit submit. There's one thing to keep note is we have the authorized official name right here. We had some updates to our DocuSign process due to DocuSign requiring registration. So in our systems, we had to code it so that we send DocuSign on a cadence, and that is in the chat. We send the DocuSign at 8 a.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Eastern, and then 8 p.m. Eastern. So it's not instant like it used to be. It will be sent on this cadence. So the last thing I do want to show you, because it was mentioned a couple of times, is our FAQ page. We have a new FAQ page. Everything now is in an accordion style. And then you also have the PDFs, which you can download here. And if you type in disbursement, you can search, hit apply, and it will result with all the FAQs that has that keyword in here. So again, this is brand new. The links are still the same. It's just a different experience. And you also have the FAQs that you can download here. And I apologize for that being such a quick demo of the portal. Again, we were kind of tight on time, so I do need to pass it back over to Mayma. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate it. Thank you, Raisa, Hope. Before we turn it over to Sue, I just want to open up the floor. I know we don't have that much time. I've not seen questions in the chat, but if anyone has any questions you feel comfortable asking, we can try our best to respond to your questions, or you can send them directly to the chat. So I'll hold for a minute or so before Sue gets started, if you have any questions. And just as a reminder, you are double muted, so you have to mute your computer for us to hear you.
Maybe just a real quick mention, I did put the link to the FAQs in the chat as well. So
thank you. Jay also put the SSBCI information email information on there. So if you have any questions, we can go through that process. Marisa put the CDFI investment area map for your reference. But those are going to qualify using category 4. And Jay put all the portal information in the chat. Thank you, Jay.
Hey, Rima. I got a question in the chat. Someone said, what is the disbursement pre-validation process?
This disbursement pre-validation process is something that we're offering for jurisdictions that are close to 80%. So you don't have to be at 80%. If you have 50%, 60%, we will recommend that you submit a complete template of that 50%, meaning when I say submit, email us. I just want to clarify, please do not use the portal. We will perform early data review to just let you know how, based on our validation, what we're checking for, like those things, those post-submission error that we look at, that Karen highlighted, we will flag those to see where we have issues. And you will adopt those best practices as you complete the rest of your transactions to get to 80%. So that's just another level of customer service that our team is providing for you to make sure that we can also expedite this process. And because often when we first start doing disbursement, we spend a lot of time just doing data cleanup, and that's just to avoid that whole time process that we spend on cleaning up the data. So hopefully that answered the question. I have a couple of direct questions to myself, so I will, Marisa, answer that. Thank you so much. I think I will turn over to Sue. And again, you don't have to stay on if you don't have a if you don't have a fund, VC fund program, but if you want to listen to Sue provide some really good knowledge, please feel free to stay on. But this will only be really relevant to folks with a VC fund program. I'll stop talking and I will turn over to Sue. Thank you so much for being here today. Sue, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for staying on. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So make sure. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Second. Okay. Thank you for staying on. I'm going to provide a quick demonstration of the VC Fund Worksheet. We will not likely have enough time for questions at the end, but we will dedicate some time in the next equity hours for questions on the VC Fund Worksheet. The VC Fund Worksheet is optional supplement to the disbursement request form. We created this worksheet to help jurisdiction organize the fund investment information. It is intended as a tool to support more accurate reporting on the disbursement request form, as we've seen inconsistencies that can delay the disbursement review process and consequently the disbursement payment. We encourage all jurisdictions with VC fund programs to use the worksheet and submit the worksheet along with the disbursement request form if you are including the VC fund program to reach 80% EOT requirement. The VC fund worksheet will help you track your VC obligations and expanded transactions. Okay. The data that you input in the worksheet should then flow to the disbursement request form. Completing the worksheet accurately will assist us in expediting the disbursement request review process. I also want to say up top that each sheet can be used for just one fund. So if you have multiple funds that you're investing in, you'll just need to make a copy of this sheet and fill out each of those funds on a separate worksheet. Okay. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so when you open the workbook, the first tab are the instructions on how to complete the worksheet. The second tab, the instructions tab. The second tab will be the actual worksheet that you will complete. I will walk through an example on this tab. If you have multiple funds, you should copy this tab and complete one for each tab. Okay. Here. The worksheet is laid out into 4 sections. Section 1 provides information on the funds and determines the SSBCI participation percentage in the fund. Section 2 provides information on the investment by the fund to the individual companies. Section 3 provides information on admin expenses paid by the fund. And Section 4 provides information on 171 fees paid by the fund. Okay, I'm going to go back to Section 1 to start completing the section. Starting with cell D3, you will enter the name of the fund. Okay. Here we have Investment Fund LP, which is already entered. This fund is in its first close, has no investment restriction, and only one jurisdiction is participating in the fund. The next row is total fund size. The total fund size includes SSBCI and all capital commitments, including any additional government funds and any private capital to support non-SSBCI investments raised in the current close and previous closes. The amount in this cell should agree to column F on the VC fund notification that you submit to us. So here in our example, the investment LP total fund size is 25 million. All right, the next was PJ executed commitment amount. This would be the amount of SSBCI funds considered committed by the jurisdiction to the venture capital fund for which at least 1-on-1 private financing available for the jurisdiction's SSBCI eligible investment has been identified at the fund level. Do not include an amount of additional SSBCI funds that have been approved contingently on the fund's manager raising private capital in the future. Generally, most of the transactions that we've seen, the executed commitment amount is the same as the SS allocated amount. In this example, the PJ executed commitment amount is 5 million. Okay, and then for cell D7 through D13, you would back out any non-eligible investments or other state investments or other matching funds. For this example, there are no non-eligible investments or restrictions. If your jurisdiction has investment restrictions, ineligible investments, investing in a fund with another jurisdictions, or using non-allocated funds or jurisdiction funds, we include these examples on the other tabs below. I won't go through these examples, but please reach out to us if you need assistance on completing the worksheet if you have these scenarios. Okay, getting back to the next row, SSBCI allocated amount. This is the SSBCI allocated funds committed to the venture capital fund, excluding any non-allocated funds. such as program income, to pay fund admin that are part of PJ's commitment. For this fund, the jurisdiction did not use program income to pay fund admin or excess 171 fees. So the SSBCI allocated amount is the same as the jurisdiction's executed commitment amount, which is 5 million. Okay, moving on to next row, available private capital, which is a calculus cell. Since the total fund size is 25 million and SSBCI allocated amount is 5, and there are no non-eligible investments or investment restriction, the available private capital, it's 20 million. Okay, moving on to the next line, total target fund size. The target fund size for investment fund LP is 25 million. This would be the sum of available private capital plus SSBCI allocated amount. Okay, so the 20 plus the 5. The target fund size should agree to column E on your VC fund notification that you submit to us. Okay, moving to the next row, SSBCI allocated percentage of private investment. This is also calculus cell. This is SSBCI allocated amount over the target fund size. For this fund, the percentage is 20%. A VC fund is a pooled investment model. This percentage should determine how much should be invested by the VC fund to the individual companies in section 2, as well as the percentage for admin and 171 fees. Okay, that concludes the section that you need to complete for section 1. We will now move on to section 2. Section 2 is where you will enter the expanded transaction by company. The information that you enter in this section will flow to the right side of the worksheet. Okay. This section of the worksheet should look pretty familiar to you because it's the format for the disbursement request form. The information on the right side of the worksheet show you how to report the transaction on the disbursement request form that you will submit to us either during the pre-validation or your official disbursement request review via the portal. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the left side. I'm starting with the transaction information. What you want to do is enter the investment transaction date, the business name, the VC fund investment amount. The VC fund investment amount should be the amount invested out of the target fund size. The SSBCI allocated funds. SSBCI allocated funds is the amount included in the VC fund investment amount. Next row, the next column is other private capital in the round. Other private capital refers to other investors in the round investing alongside the VC fund investment. The next column is investment transaction amount. Okay, this is going to be equal to columns A plus C. In other words, VC fund investment plus other private capital in the round. Next column is column G. This calculates, column G calculates SSBCI percentage of VC fund investment. The pro rata in column G should be the same amount as the pro rata at the fund level in section 1. There's 20% here. And if the pro rata at the transaction level in column G is not equal to the pro rata calculated at the fund level, you'll be expected to provide an explanation as to why it is not the same. Okay, so now let's go through with actual numbers. Investment LP made investment into 2 companies. First one was on March 1st, 2025. And the investment amount is 100,000. SSBCI allocated was 20,000. And other private capital investing alongside this VC fund investment was 200,000 for total investment of 300,000. Okay, as you can see, the calculated percentage in column G is 20%, which is same as the 20% at the fund level. I'm going to move to the right side of this worksheet to show you how it flows to the disbursement request form. So as you can see, the investment transaction is 300,000, and you can see the DRF shows investment amount of 300,000 for the company 1. Same thing with the SSBCI allocated, 20,000 on the worksheet flows to the disbursement request form is 20,000 on the DRF. Okay, and then I'm going to do one more example quickly. 200,000 and second company with SSBCI 40,000, and this other private capital is $1.2 million that's investing alongside for a total investment of 1.4 million. As you can see on the DRF, it will show up as 1.4, but the total investment transaction for company 2 and SSBCI 40,000. Okay, so that I completed my section 2. I am going to go now to section 3. Okay, section 3 here, you would enter any admin fees paid by the VC fund. Do not include any admin fees that have been paid using program income or paid by the jurisdiction. So very similar to the investment transaction section 2, you want to enter the transaction date of the admin costs, indicate if it's direct or indirect, the total VC admin expenses. The VC admin expenses is the amount expended on the target fund. And then SSBCI admin, this should be the amount that's included in the VC admin column. And then after you enter once you input the VC admin and the SSBCI admin, the SSBCI percentage of the VC admin will automatically calculate in column E. Okay, and this again should be consistent. The percentage should be consistent to the fund percentage in section 1. I'm going to put in a couple of data for this fund. Action date, March 1st, it's direct, and admin cost was 50,000 with, sorry, total cost, it's 50,000, SSBCI allocated of 10. That should give me a percentage of 20%, okay, which is consistent with the percentage at the fund level. And I'm going to move to the right side of the screen, to show you how it shows up on the DRF. Okay, so that I'm done with admin. Okay, I'm going to move to section 4, service to portfolio company. Here, you want to enter the VC fund management fees. The VC fund management fees is the amount paid by the target fund, by target fund size. Then you enter the SSBCI amount in this column. SSBCI allocated 171 fees is included in the VC fund management fees. And similar to the previous 2 sections, once this information is entered, the SSBCI percentage will be automatically calculated. Again, the percentage column should be consistent to the fund level. And here, I'm just going to also put in one date. Okay, and fund 500,000 this time, and 100,000 SSBCI, so 20%. And you can see this is how it should show up on the disbursement request form for 171 fees. Okay. So once you enter all your expanded investment transactions, admin expenses, and 171 fees, you'll come to the summary section down here. Okay, this section will be automatically calculated for you. So once you input the target fund size information, section 1, the expanded information in sections 2 through 4, the summary section totals these up for you here and calculates the remaining unexpanded amount. Right. It will calculate the remaining unexpended amount for VC commitment and the SSBCI allocated funds, right? The remaining unexpended will automatically pull to the right side of the worksheet and show you how to report the obligated balance on the disbursement request form at the fund level for both the total investment and SSBCI allocated amount. Okay, I'm going to show you how that shows up on the disbursement request form by doing the trace here. you can see the investment transaction amount is 24,150,000. Okay. And that's how much, and you can notice that it shows up as obligated. It should show up as obligated because you're reporting at the fund level. Okay. I'm going to clear my trace here. Going to go back. SSBCI allocated balance of 4.8 million. This should be reported on the DRF as SSBCI obligated for 4.8 million balance. This is the remaining unexpended amount. Okay. Okay. So to complete, completing this worksheet is very valuable and would definitely expedite the disbursement review process, and the worksheet is part of our compliance check. So this completes the demonstrations. Not sure we have time for questions on this, as we have our 3 subject matter experts on the line as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. As noted by Sue and myself, our SMEs will reserve time and next week's equity office hours to devote some time going through some of the examples that Sue showed and the other example for ineligible investments, multi-jurisdiction investment, multi-jurisdiction investments that are restricted, and non-allocated funds. So we will go through the other tabs to support with the SMEs next at the next equity office hours next week. So if you have any questions, again, I know we do appreciate your patience. This is a lot of information, or you can either send it in a mailbox. The team and I can stay online for a little bit to answer any questions that you may have. And if you do have any access issue, Jay will also stay on to maybe walk you through. So feel free to drop if you don't have any questions. We will send this information hopefully by the end of this week or early next week, and we will make this video available in the portal. Our goal is to continue this on a quarterly basis, and we can do ad hoc training as needed. So we really appreciate your help.
I have a question. I have a question in the chat.
Right.
Is there a link for the VC Fund Disbursement Worksheet template?
We will share the template after this this discussion, and we will that's what we'll share it. Right. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, so it's going to go out along with the presentation deck after this training. Not directly after, but shortly after.
Yeah, hopefully by the end of this week or sometime early next week. We have to get our producers to put our script together. So, any other questions, Raisa, Sue, or Hope, or Karen, or Jay that you have in the chat?
Mayma, there's a question on if a business is a sole proprietor using their own tax return for the W-9s, and it's usually their social security number. If an EIN number is available, should it be used on the CAP transaction? I believe the answer is yes, if you have an EIN number.
Yeah, you can use EIN, or you can, if you're using SSN, please do not enter SSN. You can just indicate SSN, and that's in the tooltip that Hope shared.
I have 2, Human. What do you mean by fund notification column F, which is the total fund size?
Do you want to take that, or do you want one of the estimates to jump in?
Eric or Dan or Carl, do you guys mind jumping in? Thank you.
Yeah, we have made available VC fund notification worksheet. It's based on an FAQ that we released that requires jurisdictions, once they complete a commitment to a fund, to report that commitment to Treasury in a timely manner. And in that worksheet, there are various data points to put in, very similar to what you just saw, fund name and fund size. It's just there are 2 fund sizes, as we saw in the exercise Sue went through. We start out with the total fund size, which includes all the capital in the fund, which may include capital for non-compliant transactions or other government monies like another PJ or state monies. The fund worksheet that you just went through with Sue nets out all those non-private sources of capital and non-allocated fund sources of capital to get down to the target fund size. And the target fund size is then reported also on that VC fund notification sheet as column E. So review that sheet, and if you still have questions, send them in. And we can also address those during equity office hours during the week.
Thank you, Carl. Any other questions?
I have one that's more specific of the numbers in it, so I'm not doing some calculation here. But I'm sure Carl can, give a help. What if we take admin fees out of the 5 million? For example, if we take 250,000 as admin fees for the funds management, would we include that in the 5 million? Or will we remove it so the PJ executed commitment is 4.75? Or 4,750,000.
If those are going to be admin costs expended by the fund, they will be included in this example in the $5 million commitment amount.
But if it's to you,
But if it's the PJ's admin cost,
expensive, you don't.
it should not be included in the commitment amount, and it should be reported separately in the DRF in the section for the state's admin expenditures.
Thank you, Carl.
Any other questions? Sue, Raisa, Hope, Jay, Karen, anything on your app?
Nothing on my end.
Nothing here.
Thank you, Maima.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much. We are feverishly working with our VC SMEs to continue to improve our fund review process. So again, I just want to really thank all the jurisdictions that have gone through this exercise with us. We will learn a lot from you, and we continue to hope learning a lot from you. So if you have any questions, any recommendations, we are happy to take those. So please send them via the mailbox. Raisa, anything from you further?
Nothing else from me. No other questions, just some thank yous. So we appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, Raisa, for organizing this. Thank you, Hope, for presenting the template. Thank you, Sue, for representing the worksheet. And she developed that after some hiccups that we had with other reviews. Thank you, Karen, for going through the best practices. Jay, thank you for your help. We really appreciate you doing a quick preview of the portal. Like Jay said, this is the same portal used for quarterly. We do have other videos that he took his time to go through, so that may help. Really appreciate your time.
Okay, sorry, just got a last minute question in the chat. If the person wants to come off mute, they can feel free to do so as well, but I'll read it. In the VC Fund Disbursement Worksheet, should admin/setup fees coming from our program income be included in the total fund size? Also, should fund managers include their portion of management and other fees in the total fund size?
Yes, the answer to the first question is if you're going to use program income as source of payment for fund admin, that will be part of the total fund size, and it'll be part of the PJ's commitment amount of 5 million. But as you can, if you work through the worksheet, there's a line there where you would report non-allocated funds. So in this case, whatever portion of the 5 million is going to come from program income, you would report that. That amount would be netted, and it will show that the SSBCI allocated amount will be less than the 5 million by that amount. And similarly, the available private capital presumably is matching that program income expenditure. That portion will also be netted out, and the total fund size will then drop by that amount as well, so that the target fund size becomes smaller. I hope that was understandable.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, everyone. I think I'm going to end it there. Thank you for closing us out, and everyone have a nice day. We'll talk to you later, and we will see you more about this on this discussion at the next week's equity office hours as they relate to the VC Fund Worksheet. Thank you.